Hi, it's Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and you're watching Job Search TV or listening to No BS Job Search Advice Radio. As I've said many times, I like to spend some time talking with you about some element of your career or job search because, you make it a lot harder than it really needs to be. And the skills needed to find a job are different than the ones needed to do a job. And the ones involved with a transition, you're dealing with more of the emotion than the process, the anxiety of the change, and am I doing the right thing? Now, my guest on part 2 of the series that we're doing on transition is Scott Anthony Barlow, who, if you don't know him, listen to the podcast, Happen to Your Career, or visit his website, happentoyourcareer.com. They're both great resources. Scott, welcome back.
Thank you very, very much. We had so much fun on our last episode that I am not only thrilled to be back, I am ecstatic to be back.
Now, folks, the truth of the matter is this was prearranged. We were doing back-to-back shows. But as a podcast host, he's being very kind here.
It's still true, too, though. I am, even though it happened, 20 minutes ago, I'm still ecstatic to be back.
And he could have said, my kids are yelling in the background. I have to go be a dad for a little bit. But,
I'm so sorry. Like, you're fading out, Jeff.
Hello, can't hear you. And I'm glad we can have some fun with one another, Scott. So episode number 1 was a really good one about finding a career that fits you. And this second one really builds on that process, which is designing career experiments. Because after all, when you think about it, folks, once you have this notion, I have to call it a notion, of what's right for you, well, we have to conduct experiments and test it out, kind of like in the laboratory where Dr. Frankenstein or some other chemist decides that perhaps, just perhaps, the idea or notion that they have, I'll go out of the Frankenstein voice, may not be correct. So we have to do experiments. So building on the notion of, okay, we've got a couple of ideas. What do folks next do, Scott?
Well, I love that you went there for Frankenstein, because I think that my worst fear in some ways for many of the folks that we've had the opportunity to help over the years is that they will do all of this great work up front in identifying what creates an ideal career for them. And we alluded to a whole bunch of that, like you said, in the episode right before this. So you can go back and listen to that for how to identify what creates a great career for you. However, once you've done all of that work, what I don't want to happen is I don't want you accidentally making a Frankenstein where you have done all this great work. You've got a great guess. You think that, hey, I absolutely need to make a transition to HR management. And then you go over, you get a job, you find yourself in HR management, and you're like, oh, this is terrible. And 6 months in, after the honeymoon period wears off, you're like, oh, what did I do? Oh,
yeah. I do understand because, well, you're someone who's made lots of career transitions. What is it? Dirty dozen, more or less, something along those lines. You have an idea, but you don't have certainty. And you may have heard Scott use the word notion.
Yeah.
You have the idea that maybe this is right, but you can't be certain. So the idea becomes we have to design experiments to test out the hypothesis, just like Boris Karloff might have done in the laboratory.
Exactly.
So what kind of experiments? Tell me.
Okay. So the concept here for any experiment that we choose to do or design or anything else is that a little tiny bit of upfront work to test out our hypothesis of what we think we want to be doing, whether that we think we want to work for Google or we think we want to move into HR, whatever it is that we think that we want to do. We want to get some road signs at a minimum and some small measures of reassurance that we are in fact heading the right direction. So in
road signs? Road signs?
Road signs.
Could you decipher that term for us?
No more so than that. As we're heading down this path, we are getting some kind of things pointing to us saying, yes, you are in fact on the right road.
It's an affirming response, a positive response to say, hey, this may be the right place. Good.
Yes. Before we continue going there, because once we're in that new job, we, just like we said before, we don't want to end up wasting many months or years of our life. So we have 6 different types of experiments that we work with people on all the time. And very often we may do just one. We may say, okay, you know, this is the best experiment for you in your situation, or we might choose a couple in order to create a larger experiment. But all of them are with the context that it is short-term, like almost short-term project in order to validate that you're moving the right direction. So number 1, the first of these.
No, we're going to do the countdown a la Letterman. Number 6.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Number 6. We'll start with the back end. Number 6, going in reverse. Oh, we call this one the learner. And it is exactly what it sounds like. So this truly is number 6. Like, we do have an order and everything like that. So we are going in reverse. And the learner is probably one of the most common. So we'll get with the less common and more strategic as we go up here as well. And the learner is just simply immersing yourself in intentional learning to understand whether or not you want to pursue a career direction. And the first thing most people think about is like college or graduate degrees, but it doesn't have to be this at all. It can be much more shorter term than that. It could be actually just attending a class. It could be instead of spending $30,000 to $70,000 and a year or two on an advanced degree, which isn't worth it for most people. It could actually just be signing up for something that's free. Like, there's courses on LinkedIn, there's courses on Udemy. There's all different ways to do that. Or it could actually be a class at your local university, or it could even be something that's self-designed. Like, I'm going to set aside an hour a week for the next 3 weeks, and I'm going to go through and digest all of the free things that are on YouTube about this topic. So it could range quite a bit, but it is intentional learning to try and validate, is this suspected desire of the direction that I'm heading, is it in fact potentially a great direction for me? Or you get that far into it and you get one class into it and realize, wow, this is terrible. It's not at all what I thought. And then you've saved yourself many, many hours, potentially even months and years. So number 6, the learner.
And that's a smart way to do it, folks, because when you think about it, he's talking about a YouTube class. He's talking about a couple of videos. He's talking about taking a class for Udemy or any number of other platforms. And many universities are offering free coursework as well. Why not take one of the classes? Go exploring. What's the worst that can happen? You wasted a couple of evenings of your life after work, and you've saved yourself a lot of money. Good move.
Yeah. So all of these, by the way, are what we call multi-purpose events. And all that means is we do these not just for the purpose of validating that we're heading the right direction, but every single one of these experiments I'm going to talk about are for a secondary purpose too. In the case of the learner, if you decide that you are heading the right direction, or you've got some of those road signs indicating that you're heading the right way, then you have now some of the skills and knowledge too on top of it as you're moving that direction. So same thing for number 5. Number 5. Yeah. This is what we call the budding expert. And this is, you'll understand this, but we might have to explain it a little bit. I found that one of the quickest ways, it's obscene in some ways, but it's very, very cool at the same time, to become involved with a certain topic or profession or industry or anything, is to become a member of the media associated with that. Now, I'm not talking about like a card-carrying member of the Associated Press. That's not at all what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about in terms of like, writing or blogging or creating a podcast or creating video or really any other type of media. This, not only when you are doing this for this purpose, it forces you to learn, but it also exposes you to other potential opportunities and people at the same time.
It's such a clever approach. Association with a guest that you're interviewing for a podcast or a video suddenly makes you the expert because you're asking good questions that make them look good. By the way, Scott, how am I doing today?
Very good, as it turns out.
Thank you. And kidding aside, for those of you who are considering a transition, doing podcasts, doing video interviews, writing about the subject, and then distributing it so that more people get to see it goes a long way toward creating the bona fides that will help you demonstrate that you have an expertise. Excellent.
So this gets super cool, actually. I'll give you one really quick example on just how to actually apply this to make it a little bit more tangible in real world. I know we mentioned Eric on the first episode as an example, and we're talking about, he thought he wanted to be in the tech industry and he thought he wanted to be around certain types of people. But as we got into his experiment, part of his experiment was he actually started a blog and wrote different types of articles about the solar industry and some of the legislation that was coming through. And then he contacted CEOs of many of the organizations that he wanted to work with. And, some of these were like, 40 people organizations. Some of these were like really large organizations. And he got to chat with most of those CEOs. And as you might imagine, not only did he get to learn a ton from those people and just having a little bit of the time exposure, and who normally wouldn't pick up the phone probably, but since he was a member of the, you could say, press or media, then there was an additional incentive. So he featured them in his teeny tiny blog and wrote the article. And then now he had an iPhone full of CEOs' numbers to where he could, as he decided, hey, I don't really want to work for this organization, but I do want to work for this other organization, he could actually pick up the phone and be able to have access to that CEO, which was, again, multi-purpose.
And thus, folks, one of the things that's inferred here is taking a top-down approach rather than necessarily applying for a job through the legendary black hole. It's bizarre to it's bizarre to me how many people try a career transition and the first thing they're doing is sending out resumes to the black hole. And what kind of results? Because the applicant tracking system isn't seeing the keywords there, and they have no basis for really judging you, and they focus in on the top third of the first page for those keywords. If they're not there, your history. And what better way to get entree into an organization than start at the top with someone you've already established some amount of relationship with? Very smart approach. Very smart. So we're up to, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that's one example of nearly infinite ways that you can use that type of thing. But it has to offer all of these. They also have to come from a genuine place. Like they cannot be purely used as tactics. Eric had to be genuinely interested in what he was writing. Otherwise, it was not going to come out the same. He couldn't fake it.
No, and it makes sense because when you think about it, we're talking about you folks changing your career. And if this is something that you're not interested in, why are you wasting time? Again, back to something from the first show, a lifetime is not a long time. You spend a lot of time at work. The idea of doing this career transition is to get to a place where you're doing something that you're enjoying and hopefully pays you well enough. And meets a number of other variables that we talk about in the first show. So the question comes down to, why would you waste people's time with an insincere approach? It's got to always come from the place of authenticity.
Yeah, love that. And especially true for this next one too, which is number 4. Number 4. We call it the foot in the door. And this most commonly would be volunteering. There are other ways to do it, but let's talk about the most common here. So volunteering, although usually it can be very helpful to the organization that you're helping out, it can be either incredibly valuable to your experimentation or a huge waste of time. And the question becomes, how do you do volunteering in a way that's hugely helpful for you and them? So I use this question as a guide anytime I'm talking about this as a part of your experiment. Will the volunteer opportunity expose you to either the types of work or the people or the challenges or the learning that you hypothesize you want to spend more of your time around? If it doesn't, it's probably not going to be, maybe you should still go and do the volunteering. I'm not trying to deter you from volunteering, but as an experiment piece, if it doesn't, then it's probably not going to be a good experiment.
Is this ideal for not-for-profit environments? I tend to think, and I could be completely wrong, you have more experience in this than I do, I tend to think that large corporations are reluctant to expose their computer systems to someone who in theory could do a MacGyver and hack their way in. So I tend to think of nonprofit spaces being much more open to that. Am I wrong?
I think that there's multiple ways to go about it. So you certainly, it can work well for like those nonprofit spaces, certainly, but also another take on this that isn't necessarily obvious when I say volunteering, it might not always be directly for the organization itself. So for example, when I was making a career change way back when, I was volunteering for a professional organization that had all of the HR executives that were in that particular community. All of them were card-carrying members. All of them showed up at all of the events. And at all of those events, it was wonderful for me to be able to be like the first person that they see at the door and greeting them on the way in, getting to know them by name, and then having an opportunity to be able to reach out to them, get to know more through that type of relationship and interaction long before we ever sat down to talk about an opportunity at their organization.
Again, very smart. I always think of situations where in tech, people do some work supporting a friend of theirs who's working on a project, and they do some of the coding, they do some of the analysis work, and it gives them a flavor for what it's like, and someone's there to evaluate them.
That's the other way that we've seen this work very effectively too, where you can actually do some of the work. We had another person that we've worked with. She was trying to decide, did she want to go into she's trying to decide if she wanted to be a counselor or not. And she took we always ask, what is the smallest way that you could validate this and get some of that information? And in her case, she volunteered for the crisis text line just to get a teeny tiny tidbit of what that could look like or would look like, and determined actually she really didn't want to go down that direction. And she ended up in the 11th hour, like dropping out of school. And it was a best decision she could possibly make right before she began her degree, and spent many thousands of dollars.
And it was a smart decision on her part, because again, it's a huge investment of money, time, energy, effort. It's taking you away from other options and things to consider. Good choice on her part.
Yeah.
So that was number 4. Number three.
Number 3. We call this one the paid researcher, and this one is very much what it sounds like too, but there's a few different ways that this can happen. I'll tell you some of the most common ways that this looks. One can be, well, I guess first I should probably mention that the reason I like this one in particular is because we find that if you're doing things for free, often the dynamic can be a little bit different than doing things on a paid capacity. So this is a way to understand what it is like with the dynamic along with it too. It creates different levels of stakes to the experiment. So one way could be literally taking on a consulting type role or a freelance style role or other things like that in a short format, project or contract, so that one, you're not locked into it forever, because if you decide, hey, I hate this, never want to do this again, then you're not doing it for many, many, many months or years after that. But then 2, it shortens that feedback loop, and a shorter term gig of any of those types is very likely going to be less difficult to get to. And we find a lot of people, I'm always surprised about, people think about that initially and they're like, well, how am I going to do that? And then we start working with them and realize actually there's low hanging fruit like right in front of you. Like your friend that started a company that actually needs a little bit of help with copywriting, and you're trying to figure out, do you want to become a copywriter? Or, there's variations of that almost all the time.
For a lot of you folks, Upwork and freelancer.com become ways that you could take small gigs, do them on the side, deliver, have a sense of what it's like doing the work. And yes, many of the rates are going to be low rates, but that isn't the point here. The point is to get some experience doing the work. And
if you can get paid $20 an hour on top of it, or even $10 an hour or something on top of it, then I call that a net positive, considering or comparing to like going back to school for 2 years and paying $70,000.
Amen. So number two is, you know what? I'm actually going to flip number one and number two. I know that's going to spoil some of the thing, but you have to understand number one to understand number two. I didn't think this all the way through. I usually go in order, but so number one is what we call let's just say this is number two. It's what we call the social Goldilocks. And I love that name, social Goldilocks.
Oh, it is very much also what it sounds like. So Goldilocks being like, is this chair too big? Is this porridge too hot? Is this corner office too sunny? Like whatever it happens to be. In this case, it's being able to try out a lot in a very short amount of time. And we call it the social Goldilocks because what we very often do is we'll have people arrange different types of what we call test drive conversations. So let me give you an example for how this might work. We had a student in one of our programs. Her name was Laura, and Laura had worked in sustainability for nearly 8 years in the same company. She flew up the ranks, all that good stuff, was well paid. And when she finally decided she wanted to change careers later on, she really wasn't even sure where to start. And she wasn't sure totally what else was out there too. So she came to us and we started working with her, and she ended up identifying 3 different areas that she suspected were potentially great for her. One of them was sustainability, one was product management, and there were 2 others, right? So what she did is she began reaching out to not just people that she knew, ranging from friends to acquaintances that maybe fell into one of these categories or knew somebody that fell into one of these categories and could help create an introduction to that person. But then what she would do is she would actually have short conversations, like literally 15 minutes conversation. She would call these people up and say, hey, I am, and she'd be very blatantly honest, I'm going to make a career change here in the next 6 months. And I'm trying to figure out what it is that really could be a great fit for me. And, I saw that you were in sustainability, or I saw that you're in innovation. And, I'm really fascinated by what you do. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to have a 15-minute conversation with me to where I can ask you some questions and understand more about what you do. Is that something you'd be open to? And what we found in Laura's case and in most people's cases is someplace between 50 to 70% of people say, yes, I'd love to. Thank you so much for asking. That's amazing.
And it's interesting, doing it as the phone call rather than sending an email or an in-mail, to me, it makes a lot more sense. So many people take what they think is the gentle approach of emailing, but it doesn't work. Not to the same degree that a phone call does. Because they hear your voice. They hear that you are not a whack job. You're not someone in Nigeria who the next thing is, send all your money. You'll get lots of dollars. We'll send gold to you. No. They hear that you're a semi-normal human being and you're just asking for advice. And what I've always found is if I say, can I get 15 minutes? When I get to the 15-minute mark, if I'm not quite done, I may say, this is 15 minutes. Is it okay if I go a touch longer, or are we really done? And most of the time they'll be gracious and give you another couple of minutes. But what you're doing is being respectful.
Yeah.
Because they are giving you a gift of their knowledge, and you did ask for 15 minutes. And you don't want to be a liar, right?
Exactly.
So I like the social Goldilocks idea because, again, it's just the notion of talking to people who are in the field as to what it's really like, and thus testing the hypothesis that you've constructed at the end of the first episode of this interview, and experimenting, having real conversations with real individuals. And I know with LinkedIn, like for some of you, you can go to grads from your university. And they may be working in the field, and be able to find them and then call them. And at least, like if they're a couple of years ahead of you in the program, I'm a grad 2 years behind you from such and such school. I'm thinking of doing a career change. I saw you're in the field, yada yada yada. It becomes a nice way to pave the way for the conversation. Very nice. So now we've got number one, which is really number two, but hey, we're calling it number one.
We're calling it number one. This is what we call the amped up follow-up. And if you're an Emeril Lagasse fan, this is a little bit like the Social Goldilocks, but a bit of bam, bam along with it. And if you're not an Emeril fan, then think about it.
For those of you who are millennials, let me just tell you, Emeril Lagasse is a chef who was very big on TV a couple of years ago. And his big thing was he would throw spices into the dish and go, bam, bam.
Yeah.
Right. I felt as though I needed to decipher this for a younger audience.
I appreciate that. So the way that it works is this. It's a little bit like the Social Goldilocks, except typically you're going to schedule a longer conversation. And what you're going to do, your intention is to go in and learn about, not just about them and the role or them and their company or anything like that, but learning also about what their challenges and problems are right now. And I'll give you an example of somebody who did this. Somebody over in the Seattle area who we worked with, he was moving from Portland to Seattle, and he went up and he scheduled a whole day of these types of meetings. He listened to everything that they were saying and took copious notes and everything like that, came back, and actually after every one of those meetings, he would go ahead and do some of the work or do something to be able to help them that they had a real legitimate challenge with. So this did two things for him. One, it allowed him to be able to actually trial out some of the work because, in one case there was a company that was trying to determine, do they want to go into this particular type of green building practices, and do they want to actually specialize in that? So they've been struggling to find time to be able to do all the research necessary. So Mike, in this case, he went ahead and did all the research. He spent like 7 or 8 hours doing the research for them, put together in this nice little report, and emailed it to him a week later saying, hey, that thing that you haven't had time for many, many months? Well, I went ahead and did it for you. Here you go. Enjoy. So he didn't say, now you need to hire me or anything else along those lines, but you can imagine how impressed people will be for something like this. It's going to create a good impression in one way or another because it was legitimately helpful.
And obviously, folks, you're not giving them a watered down solution. You're doing your best work so that they can see you at your best, because no one wants to hire someone who is mediocre.
Yeah. You're
asking them to pay attention to you and consider you for employment. No one hires mediocrity. No one wants to talk to mediocrity. You're going to send a document that's reflective of you at your best. It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. And most of these organizations that he went and talked to that particular day, he lined them up pretty much back to back to back. And they didn't have open positions. So he sent this to them, about a weekish later, give or take. They weren't expecting it. He didn't promise it to them or anything else. And then he followed up with them and later on and said, hey, you know what? He called 2 of the organizations, said, I'd actually love to find out how it could be possible to work with you, because he now had an opportunity to trial some of the types of work that and get that feedback, which is valuable in its own right. But then it put him in a position to be able to have that type of conversation with them. And it functioned more as not a, oh my goodness, please take my resume. But instead, it's much more of coming in as a partner. Hey, I would love to be able to continue to contribute to your organization. I would love to have a conversation about how that could be possible in the future. Are you open to that? And he ended up getting multiple job offers from companies that didn't even have jobs open. And after they made the offers, it put him in a position to be able to customize them along the way.
And I have to assume just because you try one of these 6 doesn't mean you can't try multiples of these 6 with different people as you decide.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. So as I asked you at the end of the first show, what haven't I asked you that I really should in order to complete the knowledge that we're trying to impart to the audience?
I think the biggest thing here is that when you are designing an experiment, you really are looking at it as, what is the smallest thing that I can do to both validate that I'm heading the right direction, as well as get some of that feedback and potentially help others along the way in one fashion or another. And all of these, as we mentioned, are multi-purpose. But when you do that, then it moves you progressively closer in ways that you just can't anticipate. Almost every time we do this, something happens that individual did not anticipate would happen. They end up getting a slew of job offers, or people request to come in and interview because people were impressed with the interaction that they did not anticipate, nor were they asking for. Or they learn that, wow, this direction that I thought I was heading down, it is absolutely not right for me. I'm so glad I found this out first. Or something else that is completely different. We almost always get something that course shifts. And that's what we're looking for. The goal here is not to get a job yet. The goal here is to validate, are we even on the right road? And we always get that little tiny course shift. Sometimes it's very large.
This has been fabulous. And I really mean that. Absolutely fabulous. You've given away a lot so far. How can people find out more about you and your work, Scott?
Well, probably the two biggest ways are the podcast. If you're listening to this, then you probably enjoy podcasts. The Happen to Your Career podcast is a great way to connect with us and hear many of the stories like this, like Mike or like Laura or many of the other people that we talked about, or happentoyourcareer.com is another great way. That's our home base, and you can find many of these resources over there too.
Fabulous. Folks, we'll be back next time with more to help you land your next role or change your career. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter. If you're interested in connecting with me, contact me through LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/the Big Game Hunter. Once we're connected, send me a message to let me know that you're interested in coaching. We'll set up a free discovery call. Also, I've got a ton of information at thebiggamehunter.us that you can watch, listen to, or read that will help you find work more quickly. Hope you have a great day. Take care.